This next audio question comes to us from our friend Incubus.
Hey, Solomonster Incubus here. We always hear how, in years past, how the course of history may have changed if certain matches didn't take place, like if Stone Cold never faced Brett. If Rock vs. Brock did take place at 30, who would have faced Undertaker, and what would this have meant for the streak? Also, WrestleMania 2000 is outright regarded as a disappointment, yet I feel the triple threat two-fall match for the European and Intercontinental titles gets forgotten.
I mean, it's impossible to say. I mean, if the plan a year in advance had been Rock and Brock, and they had that much lead time to build up to the match, it changes everything else. So if you're asking me, okay, if that was the plan and they knew that, then who would have fought Undertaker? I think Bray Wyatt probably would have been a good chance. They never would have bothered putting Cena versus Wyatt down as a feud that they wanted to do. And I think Wyatt, who ended up losing anyway at WrestleMania, would have just lost to The Undertaker instead. There were other names that had been batted around as potential opponents for Undertaker. Undertaker supposedly had wanted to work with Daniel Bryan. He respects him. But then everything happened with the fans, and they already had made their plans for Rock and Brock. But that would have been a hell of a match. Now, what would the outcome have been? I would think Undertaker goes over. But you never know. I mean, it's Vince McMahon's call. If Vince made the call 4 hours before the show, as Shawn Michaels said, you know, did he make that call because they just, you know, they couldn't decide, and Vince finally put his foot down and said, okay, it feels right, and we're going to build Brock, and you're winding down, so let's do it? Or was it purely a decision where Vince looked at Undertaker, or maybe talked to him, and could tell that physically he just was not doing well, and he said, that's it. You know, Brock just so happens to be the guy that you're programmed against tonight, so he's going to get the rub, but it didn't matter who it was. Vince looked at Taker and said, ugh, that's it, you're done, you're finished. Because if that's the case, then he would have lost to whoever he was in the ring with. But I find it hard to believe that, you know, had it been Taker and Bray or Taker and Bryan, that Vince would have been like, you know what, let's put those guys over. You're going to lose to those guys tonight. I think it was easier for Vince to look at a guy like Brock Lesnar, this monster of a guy, and say, it feels right. Let's build Brock up as a monster. Tonight, he's going over. I don't know that Vince would have felt the same way had it been somebody else. So it probably would have been Undertaker and Wyatt with Taker going over. It could have been Taker and Bryan if that's the match he really wanted, with Taker probably going over. There's also the other scenario I floated, which was before the Shield really started to go babyface. And that started when they put them with the Wyatts. I think when they first paired off the Wyatts and the Shield and they teased something between the two factions, that's when the tide started to turn for the Shield and people started cheering them and they were booked more like a babyface unit. Had they not been booked as babyfaces, given that the last time we saw Undertaker was on SmackDown getting triple powerbomb through an announce table after a match against Dean Ambrose, a rare singles match on SmackDown for The Undertaker. So if I were Dean Ambrose, I would have been honored to be in the ring with him. And I'm sure The Undertaker probably thinks very highly of all three of them. You could have done a scenario that made sense where Undertaker is coming back for revenge on the three little punks who put him out of action. And it ends up being not a 3-on-1 handicap match, but you do it gauntlet style. So Undertaker would face either Ambrose or Rollins in match number 1, and he would win. And then whichever one, you know, was not in the first match would be match number 2, and it would be tougher, but in the end, Taker would win, although by this point now he's tired and kind of beaten down. It took a lot. It took a lot to put both Ambrose and Rollins out. Now he's got to deal with the big guy. Now he's got to deal with Roman Reigns in that third and final match. He's already got 2 wins under his belt. People are behind him. They want to see him, you know, pull it out in the end. And, you know, maybe he even kicks out of a spear, you know, whatever Roman's big move is. But in the end, Roman wins. The Shield conquers the streak, although, you know, Roman Reigns gets credit for it, and it makes sense. If Roman Reigns is going to be around and he's going to be the next big guy they push, for Roman Reigns to have the honor of breaking the streak, he's a guy that they expect to be around for a long time. I don't think he's, you know, quitting wrestling to go do something else. But what that also would have done, it would have served 2 purposes. The other purpose it would have served is to be the kickoff of the split of the Shield, which, you know, didn't have to happen right away. You could have slowly built it from there. But, it builds jealousy because Roman Reigns is going around thinking, his shit don't stink. He's getting credit for ending the streak. But yet, all three of them wrestled Undertaker. Okay, it took 3 guys to tire him out and put him down. He had 2 matches before the match with Reigns. And so that builds some dissension and jealousy within the ranks. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could have gone with it. I think any of those scenarios would have been fine. But the Shield are big enough stars now, and I think are going to be big stars going forward. Probably the whole company is going to be built around most of those guys. Would have made sense if Undertaker was going to have to lose, if Vince said you're losing, to let him lose to the Shield. And let him lose to Roman in that final match, and then use it as a way to build to the eventual split. So it serves a lot of different purposes. You're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. It actually has a purpose. And your second point about WrestleMania 2000, yeah, I mean, that match does tend to get lost in the shuffle. I don't hear too many people talking about it. But I think more than anything, it's just because that match, it was good. It wasn't anything great. Jericho, Angle, and Benoit are 3 of the big workhorses of WWE in that period. We would see all 3 guys have much better matches. And to put all 3 in the ring at once, I think I remember watching that show thinking, I thought this would be better than it was. It was good, but on some level I also found it to be a little disappointing. And as a whole, that whole pay-per-view was disappointing. There wasn't one singles match on that show. That's the only WrestleMania in history that has the distinction of having not one singles match on the show. It was all tag matches, 6-man tags, triple threat, fatal 4-way. It's overkill. It's overkill. And then the biggest buzzkill of all is having the heel retain the championship at the end of WrestleMania, which again I don't think is anything we had ever seen before. And it would have made sense to have Rock get the big win there, but I think what was happening is they wanted Steve Austin back to be in Rock's corner, and I guess he wasn't ready, so they held it off and they did it the month after. So in the end, it worked out. But there's a lot of reasons why people don't look back on WrestleMania 2000 as being some great show, because it wasn't. And even the triple threat match, it was good, but it wasn't anything to sing home about. Nathan from Cleveland, Ohio. While watching Raw Monday night, an ad came on for a local WWE house show coming in a couple of weeks. The main match they advertised was WWE World Heavyweight Champion John Cena taking on Mr. Money in the Bank Seth Rollins. I nearly vomited. I sincerely hope they did not spoil the main event of Night of Champions for me, but even more than that, I hope they don't put the belt back on John Cena. I will unsubscribe from the network that night, if so, because you see this being a real spoiler and a mistake on WWE's part, or is somebody else in charge of putting together those house show ads and could have just made a mistake when making them? It depends when the ad was made. Most of the ads you hear now and you see on the radio, whatever, they are pretty much up to date. They're always cutting new ads. But it doesn't mean anything. It's not a spoiler of anything. It's not indicative of anything, I don't think. I mean, maybe I'll look like a fool for saying that when this pay-per-view is over tonight. But I wouldn't go too crazy about it. It could very well be a house show ad that has not been updated yet. I think most of them are updated, but it could just be a matter of one hand not knowing what the other hand's doing.